Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk about an interactive music system I built inside of Unreal Engine's Metasounds. So this music system is going to be tied to combat, and the way I currently have it set up in blueprints is the once the player starts a state of combat, it's going to start monitoring things like how much damage the player is receiving, how much damage the player is dealing out to other enemies, and also just how much the player is moving around, how active the player is while in this state of combat. Now, those values are going to start to interpolate this activity level game parameter. Okay. So the more the player's dealing damage, taking damage, running around, this is going to start to slowly move upwards. And the same is true for the opposite. So if you're, say, hiding from the enemies, you maybe ran away and now you're hiding, they don't see you, you're trying to lose them, this value is going to slowly interpolate downwards. And this value is going to be tied to volumes for the different stems. So I'll get more into it later, but the more active you are, maybe you have drums start creeping in here, and then as you get further up, you start to have other instruments join. When it's full intensity, you have maybe all the instruments. Okay, so let me start by showing you some of the stems I have. So I got bass drum here. I got 4 different variations. These are about 2 bars each. Okay, just quickly playing through some of them. I got some choir. These are 8 bars. We got pipe organ down here. Some strings. Okay, and even other things like snare drums. There's some gongs in there, some hi-hats, some drones, all sorts of stuff, okay? Now, what's going on is at the very start, once the system's called, it's just going to double check that it should in fact be playing. And then if it is, it's going to select an integer from an array. Okay, I basically got 0 to 3 to represent the 4 different variations. Okay, it's going to pick a random integer and then it's going to store it into a variable. And then it's going to call this start players event, which is hooked up to every stem. Okay, it's going to basically start all the stems. Now, these start this music layer function I created, which I'll talk about in a moment, but basically it has 2 different functionalities. On play, which will play just a random event from an array, because we're feeding in an array of music tracks. So it's just going to pick a random one of those. Or we have play on index, and it's going to take in an index and it's going to play a specific value. So if this is sending in 3, it's going to play that specific one. If it's sending in 1, it's going to play 1. Okay. It also takes in the tempo of the track, the beat multiplier, and the divisions of a whole note. And that's going to tell it how often to re-trigger. So right now this is 73.5 BPM, and divisions of a whole note 4, so basically a quarter note, and we're going to have 32 quarter notes. So this is an 8-bar segment. Every 8 bars this system is going to repeat, versus this down here, it's a 2-bar segment. Every 8 beats it's going to repeat. We got some 16-bar segments, so you can have different overlapping bar lengths. And if we open that up, all it's doing is it's taken in that BPM math and we're converting it to seconds. And then we're going to use the seconds to re-trigger the system. So if we're using the random system, it's going to just take the array that we feed it in, pick a random one, play it, okay? And then it's going to call the on nearly finished output pin. So this is just the output pin over here, so I have access to it inside that graph. Or it's going to call the synced indexes system, which is it's gonna do the same thing, but instead of picking a random array, it's gonna tell it exactly which one it wants to play. Okay, and then it's gonna send that to the output. And then that's basically that node right there. And then we got repeats of that node. And all we're doing is we're sending in different information. So we're sending in all the drone music files as an array. Okay, we're sending in music index for that. a pulse that I have set up in the background. I got some ambience here, which is just playing normally. And then we get into the fun stuff. We got some percussion. Okay, and this is all playing random percussion sounds. So it's going to pick a random one of these bass drums, snare drums. Okay, and then it's going to feed it into, think of it like a mix bus. Okay, I'll show you how these values are being set, these volume values later, but that's being sent to a singular bus down here where I can adjust the volume for all the percussion, or adjust the volume for all the melodic instruments all at once, or all the ambience, or even just the drone sounds. Okay. And then from there, it's going to my master volume and to the output. So the way these volumes are being set here, it's being taken care of over here. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I was saying, maybe as the activity level rises, I don't want all the instruments to come up all at once. Maybe I want the drums to start first. And then once we reach this level, maybe the strings come in, and then only save like the choirs and the pipe organ for like the very end, the very extremeness. Now, as we're pulling back, the same thing. I don't want to lose the drums right away. Maybe just lose the more intense elements like the pipe organ and the choir, and then leave the drums. And then once we get down here, now the drums can start slowly fading out. Okay. So if we look at what's going on over here, this activity level parameter is the same as this. It's just a duplicate. You see it affects up there as well. I'm just storing that to a variable that I can easily access. So in my main drone sounds, we're using this map to range node, and we're taking in what this is feeding it and putting out an output value for the volumes. So 0 to 5 will result in 3 to 5 upwards to 5 for the drone volume. Okay, so that means that even when this activity level is 0, we're going to still hear this drone. Same for all these sounds. Okay, but if we start to get into percussion, let's take a look at an easy one like the snare drum. So it's going to take the activity level, subtract 1 from it, and then it's going to set the volumes that way. So let me just turn the master volume down so we could actually visually see what this is doing. So if I hit play, we can inspect this, and we see an activity level of 0. Okay, -1. So now that's turned into -1, and we feed that into here. This is going to map it into range. So it's going to take the -1. It's going to recognize it as a 0, and it's going to feed out a 0 for the volume. So the volume of the snare drum is being set to 0 essentially. Now, as we creep this up to 1, so activity level is hit 1 now. Okay, well, let's be a little bit more precise with that. Activity level is 1, as we can see over here. We're going to subtract our 1. Now we have 0. So we're still at a 0. So snare drum volume is still going to be 0. So that means the snare drum isn't going to start to creep in until we hit past 1. Okay. Now as we go up to, let's say, 2, 2, and then we're going to subtract 1, so we end up with a 1. So now we're within this range here of 0 to 3, so we're going to get some volume output happening. So we end up with a volume of 2 at the end of the day. So the snare is set to 2 now. Now this, as you can see, maxes out at 3. So if we, as we know, we can't just set this to 3 because we're subtracting 1. So basically, we got to take that to a 4. Once this hits an activity level of 4, then we're maxed out. Let's see what that looks like. Activity level 4, we're sending in a value of 3. We're hitting our max. We should be sending out a value of 6. That's what the volume should be. Let's double check that. Yes, that's exactly what we have. Now, because this is maxed out at 3, if we carry this upwards even more, the value doesn't change because we're maxed out. So we still have an output of 6 for the snare drum. So that's how you can map these different layers to different activity levels. So if we look at the choir isn't coming in until about 2.7. We got to reach 2.7 before it even starts to calculate things. Okay. Yeah, that's just basically the gist of it. Each layer has its own math and it's something you got to play with and adjust the mix for to see what you like. But that's how you have it so that different layers come in for different activity levels, and you're not just fading in all the instruments all at once and fading them out all at once. You can control when different layers come in based upon how active the player is. So now I'll just maybe show you a demo of that in game. Before I show an in-game demo, let me just show the system in action. So even if I'm running away, it's going to increase. Set music has all the layers starting to enter into it now. Now that he's dead, that music's going to start to die down. So you can already hear the layers fading out. And we're back to the original combat sound.